The restaurant glowed with a quiet, deliberate luxury. Soft amber light spilled from chandeliers shaped like falling rain, reflecting off polished marble floors and tables dressed in white linen so crisp they looked untouched by human hands. Conversations floated gently through the air, measured laughs, muted confidence, the sound of people who were used to being heard. This was a place where time slowed for those who could afford it. Victor Hale stepped inside with his phone pressed to his ear, his tailored coat still dusted with the cold from outside. His voice was low, controlled, issuing instructions that would ripple across companies and continents long after dinner was finished. "Yes, move the meeting to Monday," he said, already scanning the room. "No, don't ask for approval. Just do it." He ended the call abruptly and slid the phone into his pocket. The maitre d' appeared instantly, offering a practiced smile. "Mr. Hale, your table is ready. Your mother has already been seated, as requested." Victor nodded without slowing. Good. He had planned this evening with precision. His mother, Margaret Hale, would be brought in by her caregiver, seated comfortably, served a meal suitable for her condition, and returned home. Efficient, clean, no complications. He would stop by briefly, make his appearance, reassure himself that everything was under control, and then move on to what truly demanded his attention. As he walked deeper into the dining room, his gaze landed on the familiar wheelchair near the far corner. Margaret sat slightly angled toward the window, her thin frame wrapped in a soft gray shawl. Her once elegant posture had faded since the stroke, her right side slumped, her hand curled uselessly in her lap. Her eyes drifted, unfocused, following the movement of shadows rather than faces. Victor slowed. Something was wrong. A young waitress was kneeling beside his mother, one knee on the marble floor, completely oblivious to the rules of distance that governed this place. Her black apron brushed the ground, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, loose strands escaping around her face. She held a spoon carefully, her wrist steady, her movements unhurried. "All right," the waitress said gently, as if speaking to a skittish child rather than an elderly woman who had once ruled boardrooms by proxy. "Just a little sip. We'll go slow." Margaret's lips trembled as they parted. The spoon touched them, and a small amount of soup spilled down her chin. Without a hint of discomfort or embarrassment, the waitress dabbed it away with a napkin, her touch light, almost reverent. Victor stopped walking. Heat rose in his chest, sharp and immediate. This was not her job. This was not what he paid for. Eyes flicked toward them from nearby tables, quick glances, curious pauses. He felt exposed, judged, and he hated it. He crossed the remaining distance in long strides. "What do you think you're doing?" he said, his voice cutting through the gentle murmur of the room. The waitress startled and looked up at him. Her eyes were wide, but not frightened. More surprised, as if she hadn't expected anyone to notice what she was doing. She stood quickly, smoothing her apron with a nervous habit. "I'm sorry, sir," she said. "I didn't mean to overstep." She was having trouble holding the spoon, and her soup was getting cold. "I couldn't just." "You couldn't just what?" Victor snapped. He glanced down at his mother. Margaret was calm. More than that, she looked settled. Her breathing was even, her unfocused gaze steadier than he'd seen it in weeks. She wasn't distressed. She wasn't confused. She wasn't alone. "You're here to take orders," Victor said, lowering his voice but sharpening it. "Not to play nurse." The waitress swallowed. For a moment, Victor expected her to apologize again, to retreat the way employees always did when reminded of their place. Instead, she straightened slightly, meeting his eyes. "With respect, sir," she said quietly, she didn't need an order. She needed help. Victor's jaw tightened. "That's not your concern." Margaret shifted in her chair. Her left hand, weak but still responsive, lifted slowly, fingers trembling as if fighting against water. She reached out, brushing the edge of the waitress's sleeve. A sound escaped her lips, broken and uneven, but full of intention. "Stay." The word barely made it out, but it echoed loudly in Victor's chest. The waitress didn't hesitate. She knelt again, as if Victor's presence no longer mattered. She adjusted the napkin on Margaret's lap, then gently repositioned the spoon in her hand, guiding her fingers. "That's it," she murmured. "I'm right here." Victor stood there, rooted in place, feeling like an intruder in a moment that wasn't meant for him. His mother's eyes were on the waitress now, alert in a way he hadn't seen since before the stroke. There was trust there, recognition, something warm and unmistakably human. "You shouldn't encourage her," Victor said, though his voice lacked its earlier force. "She gets confused." The waitress looked up at him again, her expression calm but unwavering. She knows exactly how she feels, she said. Even if the words don't always come out right. Margaret managed another spoonful. It wasn't graceful, it wasn't efficient, but it was hers. Victor remembered the last time he had tried to feed his mother. He'd been impatient, distracted by a vibrating phone, frustrated by how long it took. He'd handed the task off within minutes, convincing himself it was better for everyone. Now he watched a stranger give her something he hadn't, time. Around them, the restaurant resumed its rhythm. Plates were cleared, glasses refilled, life went on. But for Victor, the world had narrowed to the space between a waitress on her knees and a woman in a wheelchair. "Thank you," Margaret whispered suddenly, the words slurred but unmistakable. The waitress smiled, bright and unguarded. "You're welcome." Victor felt something crack open inside him, an old, carefully reinforced place he'd sealed off years ago. For the first time that evening, he didn't know what to say. The dinner rush had thinned, leaving behind the quiet aftermath of expensive indulgence. Chairs were pushed in with care, wine glasses collected, candle flames lowered to steady pinpoints. The restaurant felt larger now, emptier, as if it had exhaled after holding its breath all evening. Victor sat across from his mother, watching her sip water through a straw. Each movement was slow, deliberate. He resisted the urge to glance at his phone. For once, nothing on that screen felt more urgent than the woman in front of him. Across the room, he spotted the waitress again. She stood near the service station, rolling silverware into napkins, her shoulders slightly hunched with fatigue. Her name tag caught the light as she turned, Lena. Victor hesitated. He wasn't used to hesitation. Decisions were his currency, yet now, his feet felt heavy as he approached her, as if he were stepping into unfamiliar territory. "Lena," he said. She looked up quickly, surprise flickering across her face. "Yes, sir. Do you have a moment?" She glanced toward the dining room, then nodded. Of course. They moved a few steps aside, out of the way of the remaining staff. Up close, Victor noticed small details he'd missed before. The faint shadow under her eyes, a tiny burn mark on her wrist, the way her hands stilled when she wasn't working, as if unused to rest. "Why did you do it?" he asked, keeping his voice low. Lena didn't answer right away. She considered him carefully, not with fear, but with a kind of quiet evaluation. "Because she looked scared," she said finally. Not panicked, just alone. Victor frowned. She wasn't alone. She had staff, caregivers. "Yes," Lena said gently. But no one was with her. The distinction stung. She kept apologizing, Lena continued. Every time she dropped the spoon, she tried to say sorry. Like she thought she was being a problem. Victor's throat tightened. He had heard that word from his mother more than once. "I'm sorry. For being slow. For being tired. For existing differently than she used to. She reminded me of my grandmother," Lena went on. "She raised me after my parents died. Toward the end, she couldn't hold a fork. People would rush her, talk about her like she wasn't sitting right there. It broke something in me. I promised I'd never do that to someone else." Victor looked past Lena, back to the table. His mother was watching them, her gaze curious, her lips curved faintly upward. She looked proud. "I built everything so she'd be safe," Victor said quietly. "Doctors, nurses, therapists. I thought that was enough." Lena nodded. "You gave her security. That matters. But tonight, she needed patience more than protection." The words settled heavily in his chest. For years, he had measured love in efficiency. In solutions. In removing obstacles. He had never considered that what his mother might want most was his presence, imperfect and undivided. A soft laugh escaped him, humorless. "I don't even know how to feed her properly." Lena smiled, not mockingly, but with warmth. "That's okay. Neither did I at first." They returned to the table together. Victor pulled a chair closer to his mother, sitting at her side rather than across from her. He picked up the spoon, his hand awkward, unsure. "Slow," Lena said quietly, guiding his wrist. "Let her set the pace." Margaret watched him intently. When the spoon reached her lips, she smiled, truly smiled, and Victor felt something shift deep within him. He fed her one spoonful at a time. It took longer than he expected. His arm grew tired, his patience wavered, but he stayed, and with each careful movement, his mother seemed to relax further, her shoulders easing, her eyes brightening. When the bowl was empty, Margaret reached for his hand with her good one and squeezed. It was a weak grip, but it held meaning he hadn't felt since childhood. "Good boy," she whispered. Victor swallowed hard. Lena stepped back, giving them space. Victor turned to her, emotion tight in his voice. "Thank you," he said. The words felt inadequate. She shrugged lightly. I didn't do much. You did, he insisted. You reminded me of something I forgot. He glanced around the restaurant, the wealth, the polish, the quiet hierarchy. Then back at Lena, who stood there in worn shoes and a stained apron, somehow the most grounded person in the room. Let me do something for you, he said. A different position, better pay, fewer hours, if you're willing. Lena considered him, then looked at Margaret, who nodded slowly, as if already approving. That's kind, Lena said. But only if it helps her. It will, Victor said without hesitation. I want someone around who sees her, not just her condition. Lena smiled softly. Then yes, I'd like that. Later, as Victor watched Lena gather her things, he instructed his driver to take her home. She hesitated, then accepted with a quiet thank you. Before leaving, she turned back to him. You know, she said, your mother never once complained. Not about her hand, not about the soup, she just wanted to be heard. Victor nodded, unable to speak. When the restaurant finally emptied, he wheeled his mother toward the exit himself. The night air was cool, sharp, alive. Margaret looked up at him, her eyes clear. Kind girl, she said. Yes, Victor replied, his voice steady but changed. And she taught me something. What's that? Margaret asked. That success means nothing, he said slowly, if you forget how to be gentle. Margaret smiled, leaning back in her chair, content. And for the first time in years, Victor felt the quiet certainty that he was exactly where he was supposed to be.